We know that the Saudis are saying any normalization has to come with a pathway to a Palestinian state. Is this something that Netanyahu is willing to go for?
Well, you have to distinguish between the interests of Israel and
the Israeli government at the moment.
Of Netanyahu and the Israeli government. Given everything that's happened in the war, I would say that Netanyahu clearly is going to prioritize his government's survival. From his perspective, if, heaven forbid, Saudi Arabia actually says, yes, we'll normalize relations with Israel in exchange for, let's say, the PA being restored to Gaza and talks beginning, a process beginning that may one day lead to Palestinian statehood, something I believe is in the interests of Israel, that would bring down his government. Clearly, would threaten to bring down his government. Then you'd have other internal Israeli scenarios, like if Netanyahu is inclined to accept this, the pressure would become enormous on Israeli opposition to replace the far right in the government, create a unity government for the express purpose of these things, which, again, I can't emphasize enough, would be in the interest of Israel. But the way things are shaking down now, it seems far more likely that that none of that will happen, and that there will be all kinds of bad karma around the talks towards the second stage of the ceasefire deal, and there will be great fears that the deal might fall apart and the war resume.
Right. But Valeria, I want to ask you, because it's not that there has to be a definite Palestinian state before this can happen. They're saying there has to be a pathway to a Palestinian state. How defined is this pathway?
Well, first of all, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, just yesterday, in a rare appearance in front of the Knesset, said that there is nothing that Israel has given that guarantees the pathway to a Palestinian state. That's something that Israel is considering it to be a red line. Now, if we take in consideration what the Saudis want stability after all. They want this defense pact with the Americans that includes also normalization with Israel. And they know that as long as a group like Hamas or Islamic Jihad are in charge of the Palestinian and any future Palestinian state, there will be no stability in the region, and that's of course not in their interest. So I think that the interests of the Saudis and the Israelis are aligned here.
You're talking about Israel's interest. What are the more tangible interests that Israel can come out of with a deal? Is it basically money? Is it more security? Are there bigger things at stake here behind the Saudi-Israel deal?
Absolutely. I mean, Israel already has relations with Jordan and Egypt, as we know, and it has the Abraham Accords, and Saudi Arabia is the big missing link, basically. And there's an assumption that with Saudi Arabia would come Qatar, and after that, in the later stage, perhaps other Arab countries.
So this could really change the dynamics in the region. Iraq. It can be huge.
It absolutely could be phenomenal. And once you have that, and once the Abraham Accords have expanded, and there's a sense of peace in the region, that makes the region becomes more investable, basically. There should be more prosperity for everyone. And in the case of the Palestinians, Israel would not necessarily be paying a price in moving to separate itself from Palestinians, but it would be rather making itself more viable as a country, in addition to, in the eyes of many people, doing the right thing for the Palestinians. Now, there's a couple of really major things here. One, as was just said, sure, the Hamas still has a lot of support. I don't know if quite as high as 80%, but it has a lot of support.
That's according to the polls, the Palestinian polls, yeah.
I believe that when I see it. I doubt that would be the result of an election. But it's certainly true that there's majority support for the October 7th attacks, which is shocking. Now, this doesn't make the Israelis feel good about giving up the West Bank and letting whatever happens there happen. And maybe, who knows, Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Al-Qaeda takes over the West Bank within a stone's throw of Tel Aviv. These are big problems. So what to do with Hamas is massive, and how to make it so that Israel's bedrock condition, I'm sure, which is demilitarization, in the sense of the Palestinian state, will be accepted. So a lot of pressure needs to be applied, a lot of carrots and sticks need to be applied, and it won't be so easy. But right now, the government of Israel doesn't seem to understand that a basic partition deal is in its interest. And that, I think, is long-term fatal for Israel. So you really must distinguish between Prime Minister Netanyahu's a real, I mean, almost mania for staying in power no matter what. And what is Israel's long-term interest, which is to find a way to somehow square the circle. Because otherwise, let's be clear, if Israel does not partition from the West Bank and Gaza, then Israel's not a Jewish state. It's half Arab and majority Arab, maybe, very, very soon. This is something the majority of Israeli Jews don't want. I don't know if the majority of Palestinians want. It would be a binational state, which might not work so well.
Israel officially has 3 days left to withdraw its troops from southern Lebanon. That's the 60-day deadline given in the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon. But now Israel is reportedly asking for an additional 30 days to cease its positions. According to the IDF, its soldiers continue to locate weapons and Hezbollah infrastructure, adding that the Lebanese forces who are meant to take over for the IDF have deployed too slowly. The clock is ticking. Sunday is the deadline. What are we going to see Monday morning if Israel is not going to get its extension?
I don't think Hezbollah wants to restart the war because they were thrashed too badly. I don't think Lebanon wants to see the war restarted because they seem to be on a pathway to a far better place, given the events of the past 4 or 5 months, with a new president and with some hope that Hezbollah will be cut down to size. So Israel would appear to have leverage, but I would urge, I think, Israel not to use that leverage. In the next few days, they're going to have to present the Trump administration with incredibly compelling evidence of why the deal is falling apart and why they can't pull out, or a clearly doable plan that is something Lebanon can agree to, that accelerates the implementation. And it's in Israel's interest to do that as well, because the way the Lebanon part of the war went down essentially was a victory for Israel. And it is not in Israel's ultimate interest to mess that up and to make it fuzzy and to give Hezbollah excuses. So I would think this is an occasion for the U.S. To put its foot down and to make sure that all sides are complying with the deal that was good for all sides and that all sides signed, which reflects a bigger thing here. That there's a narrative in the world that the U.S. power is waning and that the Trump administration is very focused on domestic things, and the landscape before us tells us something else entirely. Rarely has...
At least here in the Middle East.
All over the world, Ukraine also. Rarely has an incoming administration had so much power to really make history.
And before they even took office.
Indeed.
I want your input on this. Jenin and the surrounding area is a pressure cooker, and it has been for years. We just heard about the PA's own operation there for over a month it lasted. And honestly, the IDF has been there, has been operating there, has had this focus of trying to dismantle the rise and recruitment of terrorists in this area specifically for years. Why is it not getting better?
Well, Jenin is a particular hotbed of radicalism, obviously. Back from the days of Zakaria Zubeidi in the second Intifada, that was one of the places where the fighting was most severe. The PA has never really been able to control that for most of the period of its existence. But as regards these efforts, it says two things that are important about the PA. One, they did try to do the bidding of peace, basically, in the past month or more. They did try to control Jenin. You could say they were trying to impress the Trump administration in order to be given a role in Gaza. You could say a lot of things that are cynical, but it looked like they tried, and that should hold them in good stead going forward. It also must be said that they failed, as indeed was said. And that suggests that they might fail, for example, to control Gaza.
Right, I was going to ask, how does that affect directly their chances?
If we're to believe both of these narratives in this complex dialectic, then maybe the PA does deserve to be given a chance to rule Gaza again. In fact, I hardly see an alternative. But if they are allowed that, then they must be given help. And it must be in the framework of a rejiggered and improved PA with massive assistance from the Arab world, probably, whether it be troops from the UAE or whatever it might be. They're going to need help, otherwise it will fall apart rather quickly.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has redesignated the Houthis in Yemen as a foreign terrorist organization. Apart from sending a strong signal, the decision will mean harsher economic penalties on the Iran-backed group and its sponsors. It came in response to the Houthis' repeated attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea and U.S. warships. Trump already designated the Houthis as a terror organization last time he was in office. And the Biden administration chose to reverse that, saying that it had major consequences for the population in Yemen that was already facing a humanitarian crisis. What kind of consequences can we expect to see for the Houthis and the population in Yemen now that the sanctions are likely going to be imposed and this designation is going to be imposed?
There are two levels of designation for being a terrorist. Biden didn't declare them non-terrorists, just not a foreign terrorist organization, rather a specially designated global terrorist or some such.
He took away the designation and then put part of it back.
The new designation means that the U.S. could gravely imperil humanitarian aid and even just commerce and goods coming into Yemen, into any area controlled by the foreign terrorist organization. And that would be happening in a country that's already unbelievably impoverished, and it would cause great suffering to the population. Now, I think it's not terribly unfair to Trump's humanitarianism to suggest that he cares less about this than Biden did. That was what was animating Biden. But it's more complex than even just that. Biden proved rather knee-kneed vis-a-vis the Houthis for over a year. They impeded a third of global container traffic headed to the Suez Canal, caused Egypt incredible damage, and very little was done to them. Probably the most effective strikes against the Houthis were Israel's own strikes, primarily in the port of Hodeidah. The Houthis were allowed to get away with something absolutely insane. I think by doing this...
For quite a long time.
I literally can't explain it. I don't know why the Americans were so weak about allowing the Houthis to do this, except, I suppose, for thinking that that's just the way it is with Yemen. But that's very cynical, because no country deserves to be run by the Houthis or indeed by Hamas. So I suspect that this is the initial salvo for the Trump administration that is meant to be taken as a warning that more severe military action could be coming as well if they don't cease and desist immediately. And by that I also mean against Israeli ships. There is no justification for sanctioning Israeli ships heading up to Eilat. And I just can't believe it.
They have enough problems to deal with of their own and still are focusing on Israel.
And for a time, the Houthis were seen as, a proxy of Iran, which they kind of are and kind of aren't. They are.
They're trying to position themselves also as the strongest one now.
The only one standing, or to a degree, well, except for Hamas, very tragically,
except for Hezbollah still stands,
standing.
Let's not forget that.
At different levels, and sadly, if Israel's own doing, which I hope we have time to get into. But the Houthis, I think, are in a position where their bluff can maybe be called very soon, because Iran may no longer be in a mindset to be seen as fomenting something very bad for the global economy with impunity.
Iran denies that it wants nuclear weapons at all. Let's take a listen.
Well, had we wanted to build a nuclear weapon, we could have done it a long time ago. But a program to build nuclear weapons is not going to be like our program. You build nuclear weapons in hidden laboratories that are not subject to international inspections. By the way, Iran is not a security threat.
Joining me now is Jason Bronsky, Policy Director of United Against Nuclear Iran. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jason. Zarif saying that Iran doesn't want nuclear weapons. Now, he also said yesterday that Iran has gained much more nuclear capability since Trump left the nuclear deal. How do those two statements make sense together?
It's great to be with you. I think it's deeply unfortunate that the World Economic Forum at Davos continues to host Iranian officials who use the platform to spew lies and disinformation, and it displays a real contempt for the audience there. And I really think that to begin deplatforming some of these officials, because they're just contributing to malign information operations, which is seeking to shape world perceptions of the Islamic Republic, which are not based in reality.
All right, I want to bring into the conversation Dan Perry here. You had a question to our guest.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said about Zarif and Davos, by the way. Although there are ways to do it to create a debate, but certainly not to give him the platform. My question to you is whether you would favor, and do you believe it is conceivable, for the U.S. in the context of Witkoff's efforts to categorically, whether publicly or privately, threaten military action?
Yes, I think that they should. That would actually help in his dealings with the Iranians, not hinder it.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, Jason Brodsky and Dan Perry, thank you both for joining us this evening and for your analysis and input. We really appreciate it.